emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and,
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 453.EX1524, certificate number 25939. Fanta.
I think we've talked about it on the show before, but just in case futurelings don't know, you love...
Fanta.
You do love Fanta, but you love Diet Dr. Pepper.
Very much so.
You drink a Diet Dr. Pepper, if I have one for you, every time you come.
Today I brought my own because I didn't know if you guys were running low.
We were at the grocery, and now it's on the regular shopping list. Get Ken some Diet Dr. Pepper.
There was a...
It offends me because my preferred soda pop is never on the list.
Which is Ventnor's Ginger Ale. It's going to be some old-timey thing that was invented by a pharmacist.
No, I only drink the Irish pop Earn Brew.
There was a time early in the pandemic when Diet Dr. Pepper was just unfindable in America.
Because it was so gross that
people...
It made you get COVID?
No, if you lose your sense of smell and taste, you should love Dr. Pepper.
Oh, I see.
No, everyone loves the complex 23 flavors of a delicious can of Dr. Pepper.
I'm a pepper, and my great-grandfather was a pepper.
Interesting.
He... according to my mom, used to go downtown in Van Wert, Ohio, and while my great-grandmother was shopping, he would get a Dr. Pepper and stand on the street corner and drink his Dr. Pepper slowly over the course of the afternoon and greet all the people walking by, stop and talk to people. It was Dr. Pepper.
This is in the
30s?
I mean, of all the things you could drink back then, nobody's drinking cherry phosphates today.
Right.
But Dr. Pepper going strong.
Going strong. Still.
Like perhaps as
right
relevant as it ever was.
But Dr. Pepper is pretty distinctively American, not just because it's an American pop, but because it's...
I want to say Waco, Texas. Is that the origin of Dr. Pepper?
But I think it has a taste that people in other parts of the world would think tasted like medicine.
That's the thing that I always heard about root beer. Yeah. Like when we were living in Asia and I'd be like, how come we can't get root beer? My dad would always say, nobody but Americans would ever drink root beer. To everyone else, it just tastes like a cough syrup of some kind.
I've had this conversation in Europe so much, and they really, I've plied them with delicious root beer, and they cannot stand it.
I don't see it.
Tastes like cough syrup.
But do they have different medicines we don't have? Because I'm trying to think what our most root beery medicine is.
I've actually had European root beer where
it's from actual roots.
Well, no, that they were like, hey, and it actually had an American flag on the label, like American root beer, and it was terrible. It didn't taste anything like root beer. I don't know, but Dr. Pepper does feel like cherry root beer, something that
it's just a mix of kind of fruity things.
Yeah, fruity-ish.
It's not that different than the cola flavor, which is also just a mix of common flavorings you wouldn't taste together. Maybe some vanilla, some citrus, some cinnamon. You've never had them all together, and the world loves it. Some Coke.
Did you?
I'd like to buy the world a Coke. John.
That's right. Coke is still the most popular soda pop in the world,
and probably top 5 in brands of any kind.
Of any kind,
right? I'd like to buy the world a Diet Dr. Pepper.
The world doesn't want it.
No, I'd like to buy it for them, and then they'd just drink it anyway because they'd get a free one from me.
The world wants to pour your Diet Dr. Pepper out in the gutter.
They're going to wash their clothes in it.
Apparently, 10 years ago, no less a person than Ira Glass got to the bottom of the Coca-Cola secret 7X potion.
7X is what the Coca-Cola founding family calls their secret flavoring mix, right?
That's right.
And the people who know it will never travel on a plane together. And
there's only 2 people that know the formula. It's kept in a safe in the Georgia Trust Bank. And yeah, the 2 executives can't ever be in the same time zone or something.
They can't be in the same room, or they will kiss.
But then,
but you know what? This is all just marketing hooey, isn't it?
It's marketing hooey, maybe, but can you?
Every regional grocery chain can make its own fake cola, and it won't taste quite like Coke, but it's not like it's a mystery how that flavor is arrived at.
It's the 7X flavor. Apparently, Ira Glass.
How did he figure it out?
Well, so the original inventor of Coke was a man named John Pemberton.
Yes.
And then Pemberton sold the recipe to Asa Griggs in the same way that Roy Kroc, ended up.
Ray Kroc took over from the McDonald brothers?
Right.
So if your name is Ira, do you just know everything that someone named Asa knows?
No. So Ira, he's researching some story, and he's in the archives of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and he finds
I remember
a
this.
piece of paper stuck in an old leather-bound notebook that belonged to Pemberton's best friend, a guy named R.R. Evans.
And he uncovers a torrid romance between these 2 late 19th century men.
That's right. That's why the 2 executives can't be in the same room, because they might kiss, because R.R. Evans and Pemberton kissed as soon as they both knew the formula. It's a love potion. What
kind of note would you send to your friends that includes the syrups in the secret ingredient of your product? Hey, would you go out to the store and buy the following in the following proportions?
So Ira Glass reported this magic recipe,
and Coke had him killed. He can never go to Atlanta again.
What does it say here? 3 ounces of citric acid, 1 ounce of caffeine. I didn't know you could just buy an ounce of caffeine.
Yeah, it's like a white bitter powder.
Oh yeah. 30 of sugar. It's not clear what amount
Cubes?
30 is. No,
plantations.
I think they're saying it might be pounds. 3
it's
ounces
true,
of citric acid and 30 pounds of sugar.
The acid and the caffeine will be trace elements compared to the sugar, for sure.
2.5 gallons of water, 2 pints of lime juice, 1 ounce of vanilla. I'm giving it away here on for futurelings. It should be in there.
Now you're going to be shot. You'll never be allowed within the city limits of Atlanta again.
But then into every 5 gallons of syrup, you add 2 ounces
cocaine
of. Well, wait a minute. No. Oh, so then every 5 gallons of syrup gets 2 ounces of the following mixture, which is made up of 8 ounces of alcohol, 20 drops of orange oil, 30 drops of lemon oil, 10 drops of nutmeg oil, 5 drops of coriander oil.
Coriander. If you had coriander on your Coke recipe bingo card,
10 drops of neroli oil, which I use every day.
Don't know what that is.
And 10 drops of cinnamon oil. Then you mix that all together, and then you put 2 ounces of it into 5 gallons of the rest of the syrup. Anyway, very exciting.
Neroli is bitter orange.
No one cares.
Well, that can't actually be the contemporary recipe. I mean, if nothing else, all these natural oils and juices would be replaced with cheaper synthetic esters today, right? It's an industrial process to make Coke now, not a guy with a wooden spoon.
Yeah, they had to take the cocaine out first, and then eventually probably had to find a way to say that high fructose corn syrup was the same as sugar.
But I guess there is the idea that you could, if you mixed up Ira's stuff, it would taste like a Coke.
Go ahead and try as a futureling.
I don't have enough pounds of neroli oil at home.
This is the thing. There are lots of futurelings that have heritage chickens in their backyard right now, and they go out every morning and collect their eggs. But I can get those same eggs, or close, by going to the store and buying them with dollars. And I feel the same is true of Coke. My interest in making my own Coke is pretty low. But Coke, however it's made, And I recommend that if you want a Coke, you just buy one. They're for sale everywhere.
You don't even have to talk to a person. Sometimes machines will give you
machines.
one.
What would you guess is the most popular pop in the world?
And you say pop, by the way.
Soda pop.
It might be confusing to people.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right. So I'm from one of the tiny little parts of the United States that calls pop, soda pop. We call it pop. I grew up calling it pop. And it was only when I was a full-grown adult that I realized that the people that called it soda didn't understand what I meant when I said pop. And then you go down to the South, Georgia and environs, and they just call everything Coke.
I'd like a Coke. What flavor? 7-Up.
They say, yeah, I'd like an orange Coke or a root beer Coke. But I've never understood. I've looked at the maps of the United States because it's one of those things that you can kind of determine where somebody is from the U.S. Do they say roof? Do they say roof?
Do they are they from that one weird part of New Jersey that thinks water fountains are bubblers?
Bubblers. Yeah, bubblers. And
I like on those, by the way, when they have the option, like, we don't have a name for this. Uh-huh. And that often happens. It'll be like, some of these surveys.
What's a drinking fountain?
No, it'll literally be like, what's the name for when it's sunny and rainy both? And I'll be like, I don't have a name for that. And then it'll be like, if you're in Alabama, you say, the devil is beating his wife.
Yeah.
If you're, really? Like, some of these are like literally concepts we don't even have.
Yeah, I always feel like, what is that? That's like, go look for a rainbow. It's called Go Look for a Rainbow Hour.
It doesn't have a name, but I guess it's sun showers somewhere. But then there's other
sun showers.
But then there's other weird idioms for it, often involving Satan and his minions.
Growing up partly in Seattle and partly in Alaska, we said pop, but of course that's my mom and dad saying pop. What did you say growing up in Seattle and Korea?
I think we kind of split the difference by saying soda pop, but like on the maps I'm looking at, Washington, I mean, most of the land area of the United States is pop territory. Yeah.
Oh, but there's just nobody lives in those places.
Pretty much. We have pop has the whole northern half of the country from, Finger Lakes region of New York through the upper Midwest, Chicago, all the way down through Kansas, Colorado, Utah, Mountain West, and then up through Washington and Oregon.
People say pop in all those places.
Yeah, like the only strong soda majorities are like California, Nevada, Arizona. But I think there are strong. Oh, that's not true. And then the Northeast and parts of Wisconsin,
where everybody lives.
Yeah, where everybody
only
lives.
California, New York, and Florida say soda.
But for pop counties here in the Northwest, we have a lot of soda minority. We have a vibrant soda minority.
Yeah, transplants, people from other places. It's how you can tell.
But even as a kid, I think I heard
soda pop.
I think I heard soda pop, soda or pop.
That feels like a split the difference. That's some Bellinghaming right there, where people are like, I don't want to get in the controversy.
You know, I just realized my parents said is they would say sody.
Sody.
Which I think is a little bit Southern.
Yeah, were they Okies from Muskogee?
My dad's family is Okie adjacent.
Oh, well, there it is. That's where sody comes from.
Texas, Oklahoma border.
Yeehaw.
I'm thirsty for a refreshing sody.
Well, Coke is the most popular pop or soda. And I can't even begin to imagine what people around the world call it, English-speaking people.
The funny thing is they've probably standardized an English-speaking word. It's just the actual native English speakers that can't agree.
But Coke is, as I think everybody knows, the most popular pop in the world.
And marketed on that image. Like, we're the global thing that brings countries together, even though Pepsi was the one that got behind the Iron Curtain first.
Right, but Coke has in most cases always been very strongly identified with the United States. And so the freewheeling fun of Coke and its crispy Coke taste.
It's one of those brands like Levi's and Corvette, Chevrolet, that kind of convey a certain kind of American cool to the world.
Right. Iconic kind of American flav. But what would you say was the second most popular pop in the world? And I'll give you a hint. It's not Diet Dr. Pepper.
That's not even the second most popular soda in this room.
It's not even the second most popular Dr. Pepper.
But you like the cherry vanilla?
I do.
It's hard because soft drinks are very regionalized.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like, my kids were long fascinated with this Asian soda that's basically like carbonated milk solids. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like got a milky dairy thing going on.
You can get lychee fruit pops.
Sure,
You
like
can
if we go
get-
to taco trucks, they'll always want some weird tamarind or guava, Jarritos.
Yep.
Did we talk about how other countries don't like root beer because it
Tastes like medicine.
tastes chemically, so they can't believe some of the stuff we drink.
It is extremely regional, but there is a sort of global second pop.
Are you about to say the F word?
I'm about to say the F word. It is, in fact, Fanta.
So when I was a kid, I had never seen or heard of Fanta until we moved to South Korea in the early 80s.
And then it was everywhere.
It was everywhere. Like your choices were Coke or Fanta, because that's not true. They had 7-Up, lemon lime sodas there were called cider. Confusingly, they don't have cider in them, but so they existed, domestic lemon lime sodas. But if you wanted a flavored orange or grape soda, you had Fanta, which I don't think, if I wanted an orange or grape soda in my Happy Meal as a kid, it would not have been Fanta, right?
Well, you're not wrong in remembering a dearth of Fanta.
The great Fanta shortage?
Yeah, because in the late 80s, the Coca-Cola Company stopped selling Fanta in the United States.
Oh, but they were. Like as a kid, you drank Fanta.
Fanta was introduced to the U.S. in 1960, and by my childhood in the 70s, Fanta was a popular option. If you got orange pop at the roller skating rink,
You could ask for Fanta by name.
it would be Fanta.
I just realized one more thing that's interesting, which
Yes.
is that Korea doesn't have the letter F.
Oh,
So Fanta there was impossible to express in the local alphabet, and it would be called Juanta.
Fanta, which is kind of close to
Qantas
and Juanitos.
and Jarritos.
Jarritos, right. So Fanta was absolutely a part of my childhood, and it was only after I graduated from high school that Coke decided to stop selling it here, although it is the second most popular pop globally.
Why would they discontinue one of their flagship brands?
Because Coke is one of these American corporations that has so many big ideas and so many smaller brands. They decided at that point that they were going to push their Minute Maid brand in the U.S.
They already owned Minute Maid.
Yeah, and they wanted Minute Maid to be the new orange soda pop that was available at McDonald's. And I mean, there weren't even roller rinks were closing globally, so the roller rink market was changing.
Coke bought Minute Maid in 1960. I think of them as like a juice and lemonade company, like High C. Like I think I knew Coke made High C.
Right, which is even more of a pop than Fanta.
Just a sugary mess.
Yeah, I mean Fanta doesn't have any actual orange in it in the United States, any like orange fruit in it
Right.
in the United States. And Minute Maid didn't during this period either. But then in the late 90s, some new young executive at Coke with big pads in their suit jacket shoulders
His or her suit jacket.
said we should pivot and have Minute Maid be actual juice. It'll be one of our healthy brands. And so they reintroduced Fanta in 2001 in the United States with a whole new branding campaign.
But still no fruit in it?
No fruit. Fruit is not necessary in making an orange pop.
I want to put out a shout out for Pepsi's Fanta competitor of the late 80s, Slice.
Slice.
Do you remember Slice?
Of course I remember. Well, you couldn't get Fanta, so you had to have Slice.
And the gimmick was that it did have juice. Like my parents were very excited. Oh, have a Slice. It's healthier. You're still just drinking a can of fizzy sugar
Super
water,
sugar.
but it's got 8% orange juice.
Well, and Fanta in other parts of the world does, depending on where you are, sometimes have real juice in it.
Depending on where you are, it can also have like muskrat teeth or
Yeah, right. Uranium
panda
byproducts.
panda blood.
Fanta.
So when did Fanta come back?
Well,
here?
you might remember its reintroduction because it was brought back with a very splashy ad campaign.
Is this the Dancing Girls?
Yeah. Do you remember what they were called?
The Fantanas.
The Fantanas.
So I have a very vague idea that they look like spicy Latin dancers.
Well, spicy is not wrong. They are very Spice Girl adjacent.
Oh, they were like a girl group?
They were like they're Spice Girl E. They have tall boots and short skirts or unitards, and they are I think what Coke would have called ethnic girls
kind of non-specifically.
Yeah, they were supposed to come from a tropical island.
Yeah, they had like a Caribbean vibe, right?
Yeah. And the reason was, as Coke was casting about trying to decide how to reintroduce Orange Pop, now that Minute Maid was going to become the healthy brand.
Yeah.
They could have done anything they wanted. I mean, Coke has hundreds of brands. They could have called it Orangey Orange.
They could have then just invented Zest,
Yeah.
like Slice, and had a splashy new fruit brand.
Exactly. Zesty Zest. But they reintroduced Fanta because it was such a huge brand in Latin America and in Europe. And America had so many people who had emigrated here from around the world and so many Americans who had visited other countries that they wanted to collect and capture all that pro-Fanta energy.
That's true. Like if
BFE, big Fanta energy.
I guess if it's true that if you've been overseas a lot, or even if you're just first or second generation, you have family members who grew up drinking orange Fanta and grape Fanta. Like it's you've got built-in brand recognition for a huge chunk of the country.
That's right.
Which you wouldn't have if you just cold launched Rind or Pith or something.
And the Fantanas also kind of the energy of Fanta in America at least went really teeny bopper, and the Fantanas had a kind of like, hey kids, very Chester cheese sort of pandering.
They were like, the slogan was Wanna Fanta, which seems like it's intentionally echoing Wannabe, the Spice Girls song, right?
Yeah.
Like this is the group that young girls want to dress like and boys think are cute, and there's ads in Maxim, right?
And that continues to this day. The newest...
Oh, there's still Fantanas?
No, not Fantanas, but the latest Fanta product and big push. People at Fanta, and I think the executives no longer have big shoulder pads in their jackets. The executives now probably wear open collared shirts, casual Friday, expensive jeans.
Coca-Cola executives of the 80s were probably sniffing all the cocaine that used to go into the 7X.
Yeah, right. But they now are describing Fanta as part of an omnisensorial experience that lots of...
What would that even mean?
Lots of TikTokers...
It talks to you?
Well, no, it has, it's trying to capitalize on the success of bubble tea, and it has actual goop in it.
It's got little balls floating in it.
Well, and I don't even know if they're orbular. They may be little Swedish fish
little
swimming
blobs
around. And the new packaging, it's called Jelly Fizz. You can get Jelly Fizz in orange and raspberry. There's also Sour Tingle. These are for tastemakers and Instagrammers.
Okay.
And you're actually supposed to shake the can. Part of their branding is like, no. Shake the can. It's not like the old days where you weren't supposed to shake your pop. Now you shake it, and it shakes up all the...
This is the Trump era. There are no taboos.
There are no taboos.
The forbidden is now compulsory.
That's right.
I guess I can see why. Like otherwise, all the blobs would be at the bottom.
Ugh.
You need them to be submerged.
Yeah, you need to mix it up with your sugar fizz.
I don't know if I want boba tea in an aluminum can.
I don't even know if boba tea is right, but I haven't had one. They may only be available in Australia. But I had the experience that I think a lot of Americans do on my first trip overseas, which was during the big Fanta ban here in the United States, in kind of stepping off the airplane and being hit by a Fanta bomb. There's so much Fanta's everywhere outside of the United States.
Fanta billboards, whole aisles of the store, just different colors of Fanta.
Fanta, everywhere you go. And especially me as a non-drinker, when I would be in a bar or at an event and I would say, I don't drink, the first thing anybody would say is, well, do you want a Fanta? I mean, that's basically all we have other than Coke.
It's so funny because it's an American brand, but it basically has this, if you know or like anything about it, it's like having the internationalized flavor of saying you're a rugby fan or a fan of South American football or something, right? Like, oh yeah, I love pineapple Fanta.
Delicious Fanta.
And the funny thing is I grew up drinking Fanta, but I still think of it as kind of a weird store brand thing.
Well, and I grew up drinking it too, and then drank it throughout my time on tour as a rock band in Europe Fanta was my go-to drink. And I always loved orange pop as a kid, and I grew to kind of be dependent on it because a lot of times it's the only thing that isn't beer.
You're 80% Fanta now when they draw blood.
For a while I was. And you cannot find it in such profusion here at all. I mean, Fanta's just one of 200 brands that Coke at any given moment is trying to decide whether or not to cancel or not. I mean, just the other day, Coke decided they were no longer going to make Tab. And I
can't believe Tab was still around.
They were canceling Odwalla.
Odwalla.
And I remember when Odwalla was a scrappy.
That was their little healthy juice brand, right?
Well,
or was it Snapple? I can't remember.
No, it was Odwalla. But I always felt like Odwalla was an independent company that got bought by Coke, and then Coke decided just recently they weren't going to make it anymore.
I did ads for Odwalla, so I'm very sad if they're going.
Did you?
away.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, they were already Coke by the time they hired me. I guess
personal connection to Odwalla.
Yeah, if I was going to order an orange soda in the States, I don't think I would expect it to be Fanta. It would be Sunkist or something, right?
Sunkist, sure.
Sunkist has, what's funny about Sunkist is the orange soda has caffeine in it.
Yeah.
Normally only found in colas, but, all these, unbeknownst to all these parents that are filling their kid with orange soda, you're probably also going to keep your kid up all night if it's Sunkist.
My experience of Fanta was kind of similar to yours, seeing it everywhere overseas and feeling like, wait a minute, this is an American brand. It was kind of like the first time I went overseas and saw Ford cars that I'd never seen before that were manufactured in Germany, or realizing that Opel was a GM brand.
It's like Voice of America. It's American, but it's not for us.
Right, exactly.
We don't really see it.
Like, oh, these Fords are interesting. I mean, when the Road Warrior in Australia was driving the last of the V8 Interceptors, it's like an American brand.
It's like the Fords they make jokes about in Monty Python sketches or whatever. The Ford Anglia or whatever it is.
So I was confused and a little offended that we weren't benefiting from this classic American brand.
Yes, and no presidential candidate would ever mention this.
Yeah, that's right. What the heck? When I don't remember.
I'll vote for anybody who comes out in favor of. That's why I voted for John Anderson twice.
I don't remember ever seeing Ronald Reagan in some Wehrmacht cemetery hoisting up a Fanta, and that is not like a weird comparison to make because Fanta has a strange history. I put Fanta on my list of potential omnibus topics only because I wanted to get to the bottom of why is it so omnipresent in other places and not so in America. And I just had this vague idea, like is true for us so much of the time that, there's probably a show in this.
Some funny advertising story to tell here.
Little did I realize in researching the Fanta story that it's really a Hitler story.
As happens so often when we do 20th century history, you try to avoid Nazis.
I really do.
It's just like America today. It's just like you were talking about beautiful northern Idaho earlier in the week. You try to avoid Nazis, but then you just stumble on them.
What was the last show I did that had a Nazi turns out? Couldn't have been that long ago, right?
I'm pretty sure it wasn't Beanie Babies.
I'm really trying to.
We delayed a listener suggested show just because we knew it was going to have Nazis at the end.
Yeah. You said, what about this? And I was like, no more Nazis, please.
Maybe Der Grosser.
Yeah, that definitely had Nazis in it.
But that's been 20 shows.
Oh, okay.
It's been months.
Good. Well, it's about time we got back to it.
So what have the Nazis been up to since they were driving around in big Mercedes?
Well, this actually predates their driving around in big Mercedes. I should, going back to the beginning of the Coca-Cola story, we talked about it a little bit at the top of the show. Coke dates to 1886. And by 1923, it was a popular pop here in the United States.
Or a soda-ular soda.
Largely unknown worldwide and kind of, keeping its hand in here in the States, but it was not the global behemoth that it became. And a man by the name of Robert Woodruff became president of Coke. And he had he was a good businessman and he wanted Coke to be a major American product. He was rubbing shoulders with all the Standard Oil types.
What's the era here? This is in
early 20s.
Okay.
And he begins a project to expand Coke's reach globally. He starts
He's the one that wants to buy the world of Coke.
He did.
We have found patient zero.
No, he wanted to sell the world of Coke.
Yeah, that's true.
He started a department at Coke called the Foreign Department, which then kind of morphed into something called the Coca-Cola Export Corporation. And the mandate was go out and start bottling plants in different countries. And the bottling plant would provide, the regional bottling plant would provide the bottles and the water and the sugar, which were kind of that's the hard stuff to export.
You're not going to put that in a tanker.
Yeah, it costs a lot of money to send all that stuff pre-bottled.
Yep.
And then Coke would just send their 7X formula out, and the bottling plants that would be a kind of standardization. And part of it was to keep the sauce secret.
Sure.
And part of it was that if every one of your bottling plants is cooking up its own brew, much more likely that they're going to say, we don't have any coriander, but why don't we put in this mustard because it's France and everybody loves mustard.
So the 7X comes from Atlanta, but everything else is local labor and parts. It's
right.
It's colonialism.
It's colonialism.
So easy to say. You can see why that's caught on with academics today.
So one of the places that has a bottling plant is Germany, but there are bottling plants. There are 27 different countries that are part of Coke's expansion. And Coke does pretty well in Europe. They sponsor the 1928 Olympics in Amsterdam.
Really?
And
it seems very early for soda and sports.
Yeah, and it was, and they were very prevalent at the 28 Olympics, and that sort of spread the reputation of Coke around the world because everybody, the Olympics, everybody's there. And so Coke becomes it's a going concern. And the Germans especially sort of take to it. There's the man in charge of the Coca-Cola company in Germany is an American expatriate by the name of Ray Rivington Powers. And he's got his finger on the pulse of what's hip in Germany. And Ray Powers, he's like a charismatic salesman, not a very good businessman, but he expands the Coke empire in Germany until they're selling 100,000 cases a year. And in 1933, he hires an assistant, or a young kind of engineer, businessman, Coke guy who's a native German by the name of Max Kite, and his last name's spelled Keith, what we would say Keith, but pronounced Kite.
Kite, interesting. So Keith Richards can literally be high as a kite.
Yeah, he's Kite Richards.
Okay, Max Kite.
And Max Kite is a really good businessman. He's maybe not as charismatic, but super good at business.
Prussian efficiency.
And then Ray Powers dies in a car accident. And Max Kite takes over and becomes a business juggernaut and starts selling Coke in Germany like it ain't no thing. And he positions Coke initially as an American pop.
Yeah.
But as time goes on, he really tries to nativize the Coke story so that it becomes...
Is this because of the political direction of Germany post-1933?
Well, so 33, right, is the beginning of the real Nazi era.
And maybe that's when you start de-Americanizing your American brands, just in case.
And so this happens gradually. He's raising Coke's profile as German becomes more and more nativist and protectionist. In fact, one of his competitors, a cola company called Afri-Cola, which is still available in Germany, and I've had Afri-Cola, and I was always wondering, what is it?
I'm sure it has offensive old ads, right?
It does. The most offensive thing that Afri-Cola contributes to this story is that some representatives of Afri-Cola were touring in America and saw Coke for sale there and noticed on the bottle caps that there was the Hebrew letter for kosher.
Oh, right.
And took that back to Germany and said, Coca-Cola is is Jewish.
Conspiracy.
And there was a Jewish guy on the board of directors, Harold Hirsch, and they actually said, the kind of German distributors of Coke went back to Woodruff and said, hey, we got to get this Hirsch off your board. It's affecting our sales.
Off of the American Coca-Cola Company?
Yeah, and Woodruff, to his credit, said no.
Oh, okay.
Me and Harold are thick as thieves.
Yeah.
But at that point, Max Kite distanced Coke in Germany from the United States, and their ads, they were independent bottling, and it was called Coca-Cola GmbH. So it was a separate. He made the case that it was a separate. Well, no, this was Woodruff's plan too, right? All of these Coke bottling companies were independent. And Kite started to, if you look at the Coke ads from the 30s, they are super duper Third Reich. You're just chiseled jawed, braided hair.
Aryan Superman.
Aryan super kinder, drinking Coke. And Kite sidled up to the Nazis and really kind of co-branded Coke in Germany with the Nazi Party. Coke would sponsor Nazi rallies.
Seems like a risk.
Well,
the My Pillow guy took that risk, but not many American companies have recently.
So Kite was extremely cagey, and depending on what article you read now, it's very clear that Kite put Coke front and center in the Nazi era.
And the question is he just some holding his nose schemer,
well,
Oscar Schindler type?
He also studiously avoided ever joining the Nazi Party.
Huh.
And he would have, he had a conference. He attended the 9th annual concessionaire convention right at the same moment that Hitler was Anschlussing Austria. And he had it was a big Coke celebration, but they had a big banner with Hitler on it. And as everyone was Sieg Heiling, he also got everyone to, stand up and salute and pledge their allegiance to Coca-Cola.
Really?
So
they're Sieg Heiling with one hand and drinking the pause that refreshes with the other hand?
It's really unclear whether they were Sieg Heiling Coke. Kite is a Coke loyalist, and he's in touch with Woodruff through all of this.
Yeah, what does the American board think of? On the one hand, that's great brand loyalty, I guess.
Well, by 1938, he's gone from selling 100,000 cases of Coke in Germany to selling 4 million cases a year of Coke.
Wow.
It's a huge success story. And to most Germans at the time, the real push toward branding Coke as a German company meant that they had lost the sense of it as an American product.
It was not a big selling product back when it had closer import ties.
No, it was a German drink, Dronken. And so Coke sponsored the 36 Berlin Olympics. Coke was everywhere in 36. And the Germans took it as most of the attendees there in Berlin saw it as who weren't from America or the rest of the world that knew it as an American drink, saw it as a local beverage made good. Apparently Hitler enjoyed a Coke.
Is that true?
Yeah.
We have testimony.
There's this anecdote that he had, he was sitting in his private theater in whatever his bunker was at the time, watching his copy of Gone with the Wind and drinking a delicious Coke.
Kind of an Americophile, that guy.
Yeah, for a while.
It's like when they found all that porn on Osama's computer.
And all this time, of course, Woodruff is sending Kite his 7X formula. Right? Kite can't be making this at home. This is coming from the United States.
At what point is there some kind of import ban on an American company?
Well, so that started to happen, and at the start of the war in 1938, of course, there were import bans, but America wasn't yet in the war.
Right.
So he could keep getting the syrup. And there were bans in Germany on, first of all, glassware was always kind of privileged to making bomb sights and telescopes and stuff, or whatever, binoculars. But Kite got around it because with every successive country the Germans invaded, they also took over the Coke bottling plants that were there. And then when they invaded...
they're carbon neutral, but with glass.
Yeah, when they invaded the Sudetenland, all of those Bohemian glassmakers and all of the Germans that lived in the Sudetenland that understood glass blowing, Kite got in there really fast and was like, I'm going to need these people. There was a ban on sugar, like all the sugar was co-opted.
Because there were shortages.
But he got in and arranged to have a certain percentage of the beet sugar allotted to his manufacture of the pop, and he stockpiled enough of the Coke 7X formula that when the United States finally entered the war and all ties were severed, he could no longer talk to Woodruff. Coke and Coke Germany
They were both still producing Coke on the opposite sides of the war.
Yeah, and he still had enough Coke syrup that he continued to manufacture Coke. Now, it started to be scarce because he was reserving it for and strangely, the last place it was available was in hospitals. Coke was being given to wounded soldiers, and then later only members of the Nazi Party wounded soldiers. They could keep getting Coke until 1942.
I wonder if he started cutting it with something. It's interesting that
amphetamine.
Well, that's what I was going to say. We think the Third Reich ran on meth and Benzedrine, but apparently Coke was their recreational stimulant of choice.
They loved Coke. Another thing that allowed him to really promote Coke was the Nazis had a campaign against drunkenness.
Oh.
And so they were always pushing, like, stop drinking so much, don't drink so much
Isn't
beer.
Isn't that weird for a Bavarian political movement?
Well, yeah, but
I guess in times of war, you got to do what you got to do.
You know, they were anti-Catholic and pro-soda pop.
Yeah.
So Coke was always presented as the good Aryan drink that...
Which is funny because it's, bottle of chemicals.
Yeah.
Nature's goodness.
But so at a certain point early in the war, most American brands in Germany were nationalized, right? I mean, Ford, GM, IBM. I mean, these companies that were American.
The government, the Reich took over the factories.
The Reich took them over and imprisoned their American leaders. But Kite kept on the other side of it, kept Coca-Cola open by getting himself appointed the head of the Office of Enemy Property. So the very part of the German government infrastructure that took over American businesses and nationalized them, he was in charge of. And so he kept Coke GmbH
He is
open.
Oscar Schindler, except he has no interest in saving any lives. He just wants to get every possible bottle of Coke on the shelves he can.
He loves Coke, and he's so loyal to Coke that throughout the war, he fights off every attempt that people in the German government make to either shut down Coke or to rename Coke or to capture Coke. But by 42, he's out of Coke.
Out of 7X.
He's got no 7X, and he can't keep making Coca-Cola. And so he's got a bunch of...
he's got a bunch of guys just messing around with coriander, and they can't get it right.
He does. He's got all these chemists, all these people, like, what do we do? What can we... And also, there's not... coriander is sequestered for the war effort because it's, they've got to be making...
You got to put cilantro on your
lamb vindaloo.
Spätzle.
So he's got a bunch of chemists sitting around working on something they can make. And they come up with a recipe made out of what he called Kite called it, the ingredients were the leftovers of the leftovers. They combined...
They only had the stuff that no other industry wanted.
Yeah. They combined the, apple leavings from making cider, the kind of pressed out apple rinds and fibers from the cider making industry, combined with the leftover whey from the cheese making industry and a little bit of beet sugar. And they made this semi-drinkable beverage that kind of resembled ginger ale. It was opaque, kind of the whey made it a little bit
It's kind
milky.
of what happens if you order like a ginger ale at a restaurant that says, "Oh yeah, we'll just have the bar make you one,"
Yeah.
and then they just put like 6 things together. Here's a little Coke, and here's a little
Bitters,
yeah. It's like ginger ale.
I've had a million of those.
Is it?
They're never like ginger ale.
No.
But in this case, and he's sitting around, he's got all his team there, and he's like, okay, we've come up with this beverage. Like, what do we do? What do we call it? Like, use your imaginations. And in German, the word imagination is Fantasie. And his chief salesman, Joe Knip,
Yeah. He said,
stands up and goes, Fanta! Fantasy, Fanta, that's it, exclamation point. And they call it Fanta. They bottle it. It's cheese and apples and beets. And it is a runaway smash in Germany during the war. By 1943, they're selling 3 million cases of Fanta. No more Coke, but it is presented as the patriotic beverage of the Reich. And it goes off. Right. And of course they're exporting it to everywhere in the Reich. So Fanta becomes a kind of European symbol of, and it's presented, it's short for fantasy or fantastic. Fantastisch.
I've been to a down market German amusement park called Phantasialand. So they still have the root meaning dream or whatever. Imagination.
And then toward the end of the war, Fanta some large part of its sales was due to the fact that people were adding Fanta to stews and soups because there wasn't anything, like all the flavors were gone. There wasn't access to anything, right?
At least this has whey and pressed apple.
Yeah, and sugar. I mean, it's sugary. So Fanta became an ingredient in late stage German cooking. At the end of the war, communication was reestablished, and one of the first things that happened was Robert Woodruff
sent over a big liner of 7X.
He connected with Max, and Max throughout the entire war, although he was as close to the Nazis as you could be, he'd never joined the party. He'd never sworn a vow.
He's hedging his bets.
And the first telegram he sends to Robert Woodruff is, Coca-Cola GmbH is still functioning. Send auditors.
Like, I did it. He really thinks he's Oscar Schindler. I did it. I kept Coca-Cola alive.
He did. And Woodruff hired him back. And Max Kite sent the profits that he'd made from Fanta to Coca-Cola at the end of the war. He did not profiteer.
Wow.
He had kept the books. He knew how much money he'd made, and he had it all, and he sent it back to Coke. So he was in Coke's good graces. Now, as the Americans made their way into Germany, before the war was over, they were already, because a lot of those bottling plants had been bombed during the war, they were already setting up those bottling plants and getting Coke back in production in Europe. This is part of our American, it's part of the takeover where the guns haven't even cooled off, and we're back making Coke. Apparently, in some places, they were already making Coke in Europe by April of 45.
What was it called? And what did they call it during the pandemic? The businesses that could stay open? Essential workers. Essential workers, something like in state of Washington decided the cannabis
That's right.
stores were essential workers.
Kite becomes president of Coca-Cola Europe, and Fanta is gradually they continue to sell it in Germany.
And at this point, there's not a bunch of flavors of Fanta. It's still just
apple cores and cheese.
Apple cheese goop.
Yeah. But in 1955, an Italian member of the Coke bottling family takes Fanta and adds citrus to it because, in Italy, they had a lot of citrus groves. And so they added orange to it. And they developed in Italy the recipe that became the Fanta that we know.
Which is the orange is the original?
The orange was the original. And so Coca-Cola Europe, which has been selling Fanta all along, this new product of Naples becomes the new kind of definitive Fanta. And they're selling it throughout Europe by mid-50s, and it's a huge hit. Now, Coke owns it, but Coke is afraid to bring it to the United States because it's so popular in Europe, they're afraid it's going to undermine Coke itself.
I see. Their Coke sales could decrease if people catch on to... Well, do you know Germany's solution for that? Have you ever had a delicious can of Mezzo Mix in Germany?
Yeah, what is Mezzo
It's like
Mix?
it's this homegrown drink called Spezi, which is like half orange soda, half cola.
Right.
Like they split the difference. It's like my kid's favorite drink. My son's favorite drink in Germany is this weird orange cola hybrid.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that's basically like the suicide that you would make at the roller rink.
Sure, exactly.
Right? Have Coke, or Coke, root beer, Dr. Pepper.
There's no
orange.
grape in it, I guess. But yeah, I wonder if that came out of the war with Coke and orange being the two
dominant
surviving
flavors.
soft drink brands.
Well, 1960, Coca-Cola was kind of getting hit on all sides by all these new flavors of pop in America, 7-Up and Dr. Pepper and Grape Pop and Orange Pop, and it was all putting pressure on Coke, which still only had one product in the United States. And so Coke introduced Fanta, didn't really push it that hard, but, like I said before, by the time I was a kid, Fanta was a big part of the Coke lineup. In 1957, Coke actually gave Max Schmeling, the boxer that beat Joe Louis, like Hitler's Nazi poster child.
Literally, right?
Yeah.
That famous picture of him knocking out Joe Louis that Hitler had on his wall.
Yeah, and he and Hitler were pals. I think he kept a signed picture of Hitler on his desk.
Did you see the news, by the way, last month that like Glenn Beck has that picture behind him in a bunch of photos?
Of Max Schmeling?
Of Max Schmeling knocking out Joe Louis.
No.
Which, if you know the history, is a little bit of an eyebrow raiser.
Whoa.
So I hear Hitler liked this photo. I don't know much about it, but I'm going to get me one.
He really beat that black guy.
You got it. You can't deny it.
They actually gave Max the bottling plant in Hamburg. He became a Coke bottler.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I think kept the picture of Hitler on his desk.
Like in the 50s?
Yeah. 57.
My knowledge of Coke from this period, have you ever seen the Billy Wilder movie 1, 2, 3?
No.
It's like Jimmy Cagney's last movie for a couple decades. He plays like an American expat Coke executive in divided Berlin. Mm-hmm. It's a real kind of fast talking thing with lots of Cold War era jokes about the East Germans and the Soviets and, American go-go capitalism versus hidebound collectivization. And it's a very funny satire, but at this point, they're definitely presenting Coke again as the popular but American thing.
Yeah.
Like it's definitely like an island of American culture in the middle of, creeping Soviet influence and Europe, basically. It's an American island again. The idea of Coke as any kind of homegrown German thing, I guess, is gone at this point, at least for American viewers.
It's funny because when German prisoners of war were first brought to America, and were handed Coca-Colas, like, all right, well, you're here in the prison camp now, here's a Coke. A lot of them said, "You have Coke here too? Like, how did you get German Coke?
You've made me feel so at home.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you for giving me this specialty of my homeland." After the war, Coca-Cola internationally reasserted itself as this is a homegrown American thing. But Fanta did not, right? People in Europe do not think of Fanta as a Coke product or an American thing at all.
None of the branding was Coke related.
No.
when I was a kid. They were in white and colored cans.
Yeah.
Purple or orange, depending on the flavor. And you'd have to look at the back to see that it was a registered mark of the Coca-Cola company.
Fanta is the number 2 soda globally, but it's only number 8 in the U.S.
I'm surprised it's that high.
Yeah, I know.
I guess I don't do a lot of shopping for orange and grape flavored.
A lot of it, I
soda,
think, is
I'm not
that,
6.
it's the orange pop of record at McDonald's and, like anywhere that Coke products are sold.
So it's a lot of fountain sales, probably.
It's a lot of that, or it becomes the default orange soda wherever you are. In 2015, in Germany, there was a 75-year anniversary party for Fanta, and they reissued Fanta in the original bottles, which had, a very iconic kind of mid-century logo. It had like two little mountain peaks, and it said Fanta. And the ad campaign said, 75 years ago, resources for our beloved Coke were scarce.
For reasons that we will not go into in this campaign.
But now we're taking it back to the flavor of the good old days. And of course, people there were quick to point out that the good old days were the
last days of the Third Reich.
Yeah, the middle of the end of the Third Reich.
It's not apple and whey, right? They didn't bring back the original ingredient.
No, they were still, I think. Well, no, wait a minute. No, it was just the ad.
That doesn't surprise me that nostalgia for Nazism travels better than nostalgia for
whey-based pop,
whey and apple-based pop.
What's really interesting about this is that there's no way that Coke can deny this association, but Fanta remains the number 2 most popular drink in the world. This is way more of a thing than Adidas and Puma,
right?
I mean, even more than
Volkswagen
and Mercedes. This is the number 2 soft drink, and so Coke, in all of their literature, in all of their stories, says yes, Fanta was invented in Germany in, 75 years ago.
Oh, but it doesn't give a year.
They're very careful to say that Max Kite was never a member of the Nazi Party. And in all of their promotional material, they leave it at that. And it's true. He wasn't. But
I feel like if you have to say that in an ad, by the way, he was not a member of the Nazi Party. I mean, that's...
The man who invented Fanta was in Germany at the time. Just a coincidence.
Our founder was never a member of the Nazi Party t-shirt is raising a lot of questions already answered by my t-shirt. And that concludes Fanta, entry 453.EX1524, certificate number 25939, in the omnibus. As we always remind listeners of any time period, we were...
always against Nazism.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
Literally nothing about the aesthetic. We don't like the food.
Nope. We don't like the pop. When you look back 75 years from now, you will not have to apologize for Omnibus.
No. Their foreign policy was bad. Domestic policy worse.
Mm-hmm.
Really not a lot of bright spots, honestly.
The trains didn't even run on time. That's a myth.
No, they were probably on time before when nobody was blowing up the tracks.
No, they were never on. Trains have never been on time anywhere.
In Japan.
Oh, yeah, I guess.
I've definitely been on a Japanese bullet train and heard an announcement and asked somebody, excuse me, what did they say? Because I was afraid I'm on the wrong train.
Yeah. And
I was told, the train is going to leave a minute and a half late. And that's an apology from the company. But as products of our time, John and I oppose Nazism as vocally as anyone, but we were also on social media, so nobody's perfect. I was at Ken Jennings. John was at John Roderick. You could find us jointly as at Omnibus Project on all of your favorite platforms and streaming services.
We are against social media, though, or at least I am, and I think you're increasingly doing it. Did you say today that you're tweeting a lot less?
Oh, yeah.
That feels like a big step.
A shadow of my former self. And it feels great.
Yeah, it is. It's a good feeling.
Somebody said yesterday on Twitter, so apparently I still have a problem.
I guess so.
Somebody said it's a cool place you can meet new people and also just destroy your psyche. You know, and I'm not phrasing it as wittily.
Can't you really meet new people there, though?
Yeah, there's a bunch of cool people there. I mean, what does meet mean?
But it makes them uncool.
If they're on Twitter?
As time goes by, being on Twitter takes your cool away.
It's true. You need to find the new blood and suck all the life out of them before they understand all the in-jokes and become as messed up as we are.
It's like Marceline's dad on Adventure Time. He's just there to suck souls.
You can find fellow futurelings from all eras at just by Googling the word futureling on Facebook or Reddit or what have you.
Try it. Well, you're not going to Google it on Facebook unless Googling something has become the Fanta become the Coca-Cola of Atlanta.
I'll have a Google. What flavor? Bing.
I'm going to put futurelings into Google. The first thing that comes up is the Reddit.
Interesting.
Omnibus Podcast Futurelings on Reddit.
Facebook's trying to keep Google out.
Facebook is second, and then futurelings.com, which apparently we own. Is that true? No. That's a different group. Who are these people? They're the Omnibus Futurelings, but they have their own website. Futurelings.com. Who got that?
Didn't we register that? Oh, no, we got the Twitter handle, but somebody else already had the URL.
Oh, it's very funny. It's like 8-bit software graphics. Oh, I think that's charming.
And it has links to the Facebook group.
And then there's a Goodreads Futurelings group where they're sharing book stuff with one another.
Well, that's a great idea.
You can go to Cotton Bureau and buy Futureling t-shirts. Yeah, so it goes on and on. There are different subreddits, LibRed. Twitter is like 10th thing down.
Another new way to meet fun people and just ruin your mind on life.
There's the omnibusproject.com merchandise store where you can go buy omnibus-themed stuff.
There's shirts and stuff for sale.
So anyway, boy, a lot of places you can meet the futurelings.
What a fun social opportunity for you. You could email us at theomnibusproject@gmail.com or send us physical items to P.O. Box 55744. Shoreline, Washington, 98155. I only have a couple of things here. Somebody sent us a thank you note for the show notes we send over.
Nice.
If you give at the third of the 5 tiers on our Patreon, you get a copy of our original show notes signed by John and myself.
Mm-hmm.
And this person is the first one ever to say thank you. I mean, I guess everybody else said thank you by supporting the Patreon every month.
Right.
But this guy did that and sent over a thank you card. So you are very welcome, Jeff. Let's see. We also got a postcard from Paula, who is participating in the Omnibus Postcard Exchange this year. That's something that the Facebook group is doing. Although she sent us a postcard, and I hope she knows that we're not doing the Omnibus Postcard Exchange. We are uninvolved and, in fact, strongly disapprove. I have no idea why I bought this postcard when I was in London in 1994, but I did. But it is very omnibus. It's a kind of a boring recruiting poster for the Royal Navy that looks a little, maybe more like the label of a Worcestershire sauce bottle.
Oh, yeah.
It's back before recruiting posters were big and iconic, at least in the UK.
Well, in the UK, selling something through its association with Worcestershire sauce
that's the number one way to get soldiers is to promise them brown sauce.
Delicious.
They're looking for recruits between the ages of 18 and 38. And chest measurement 34, height 5'3" or 5'3.5" or higher. 5'3.5". They're okay with some pretty short sailors.
Well, they have to get in those tight spaces.
They do. Those are for the submarines. Payment from 1/3 per day. 1/3 of a what, do you suppose? This is like the sugar.
1/3 of a ration. 1/3 of a rasher of bacon.
1/3 of a ladle of grog. 1/3 of a. I mean, I'm trying to do the math. It can't be 1/3 of a pound per day. Oh yes, it could.
Yeah,
it could.
Sure.
Okay, but you do have to have a chest measurement 34, and it doesn't say what that is. 34.
That's not huge.
No.
A 34-inch chest.
I'm a 34C, so I guess I could be in the Royal Navy.
You are a 34C jacket?
No,
Or
that's my
bra.
bra. That's my bra cup size.
I don't think that's true.
It even has a list of battalions you can join. You have your choice of the Benbow, the Collingwood, the Hawker, the Drake, or the Howe, the Hood, the Ensign, and the Nelson in the 2nd Brigade. I wouldn't be picky if I were recruiting Navy soldiers during World War I, which this is 1915. I think I would be okay with the sunkenest chests that the coal mines of Wales could provide me.
Yeah, I mean, the more sunken their chests, I mean, it's a bad omen for if you're a submariner.
That's true.
A sunken chest.
But you can turn sideways and a cannonball will just whiz right by you in the cavity left by your non-34-inch torso.
Maybe it's a reference to the sunken chest of Davy Jones.
Arr.
Apparently, I'm just discovering there is now a podcast called the Omnibus Podcast
Is this new?
featuring State Representative Jeremy Munson, Republican from Lake Crystal, Minnesota,
It's because omnibus is like a legislative term for a bill that contains everything.
and Albertville City Councilman and political activist Walter Hudson. So
Is this like from the left, from the right?
I don't know it.
Why is a Minnesota Republican doing a podcast with an activist?
Well, he might be a conservative activist.
Different kind of activist,
But
I
it
guess.
pops up. It pops up when you Google Omnibus Project, but then there doesn't appear to be any more information about it.
Oh, this is the guy that proposed rural Minnesota seceding to South Dakota. Do you remember this guy?
No. How would that possibly benefit either place?
I think it's just more like a new civil war is coming. We want to join our Republican brethren, not those public radio listening liberals in St. Paul.
Right. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it's a state of what's it called? State of Jefferson.
State of Jefferson.
Kind of thing. It's a Jefferson state of mind. And I mentioned the Patreon obliquely, but if you would like to
Mention it more directly.
if you would like to donate to the running of the show every month and send us a thank you note when we send you fun prizes, because why wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that how your mom raised you?
Mm-hmm.
You can find out how to do that at patreon.com/omnibus project.
I went to that,
You know, listening to Representative Munson's show?
no, but I went to the Futurelings website, and they have a whole message board.
You're really hyping this thing that you are not sure if is good or not.
I'm not sure if it's good, but I mean, they have a message board.
Good for them. What year is it?
I mean, it doesn't have a ton of engagement, but it's there. They have entries for all of our episodes.
But are we fracturing the fandom by telling all the Facebook and the Reddit people about this new
Well, I
destination?
don't know. You know, I have a message board over on my Patreon at patreon.com/johnroderick.com.
That you just happen to mention .com.
And they talk about Futurelink stuff all the time too. So you should go there. It costs money. Futurelings, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.